Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. He bought a farmhouse for peace, but got a war. When a ruthless HOA tries to strong-arm him off his own land, one man stands his ground with grit, goats, and a lawyer who doesn't blink. They came for control. He gave them hell. Welcome to the fight for freedom, Texas style. When I bought the farmhouse, I thought I was buying silence, serenity, a final escape from the synthetic headaches of suburbia. I'd spent 15 years working in aerospace engineering, constantly surrounded by sterile office walls, fluorescent lights, and people who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. I didn't quit because I broke. I quit because I was done playing polite in a world where everything came with a form, a password, or a dress code. 12 acres of peace, I told myself. 12 acres of dirt, wind, sweat, and a leaky barn that smelled like pine and goat shit. It was mine, every inch of it, and I loved it. The farmhouse had good bones. Built in the 1930s, renovated just enough to make the plumbing less homicidal. I put my tools to work, fixed the porch, replaced the roof tiles by hand, and even taught myself how to keep bees. Honest bees. They don't pretend to be something they're not. Unlike humans, the land sits on County Road 14 just outside the city limits of Fairfield, Texas. On the other side of the property line, to the west, is a newer development, Hickory Ridge. You know the type. Clean lawns, plastic mailboxes, and homeowners so deep in HOA bylaws, they probably iron their garbage before taking it out. I'd driven past it once, didn't think much of it, until they decided to think about me. The first sign came in an envelope, no return address, just a glossy seal stamped with a fancy oak tree. Inside was a letter that read like someone had swallowed a legal textbook and thrown it up on paper. Dear resident, it has come to our attention that your property violates several Hickory Ridge community standards. It went on about unapproved fencing materials, excessive noise levels, I have goats, not a rave, and non-conforming structures, specifically my barn. At first I laughed. Not a chuckle. A full-bodied, shoulders-shaking laugh. My land was older than their entire neighborhood. There was a physical buffer zone between us, a dry creek, a row of trees, and about 300 feet of wild grass. No way they had jurisdiction. I tossed the letter on top of my firewood pile and went back to building a chicken coop. 2 days later, a white Lexus pulled up near my gate. I was refilling a water trough when I noticed the car. At first, I figured it was lost. That happens out here. But when the woman got out, clipboard in hand and sunglasses the size of dinner plates, I knew exactly who she was. And what she was. She didn't ask permission to step onto my property. Just strutted up the dirt path like she was visiting her dominion. "Excuse me," she called in that voice, tight, polite, and soaked in passive aggression. "Are you the owner of this residence?" I leaned on my shovel. "I am. Can I help you?" She smiled the way rattlesnakes smile. "Karen Slater, I'm the president of the Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association. We've sent you a letter about several compliance concerns." I cut her off. "I got your letter. You'll be happy to know it made excellent kindling." The smile twitched. "Sir, I don't think you understand the seriousness of the matter. Your property is visible from several of our community lots, and it impacts the aesthetic cohesion." "No, ma'am," I said. "You don't understand. I'm not in your HOA. My property isn't part of Hickory Ridge. It never has been. It never will be." Her tone changed. "No more sugar. We've reviewed property maps. Your parcel sits within our extended perimeter." "Funny," I said, "because I have my deed right here inside the house, along with a signed statement from the county registrar that says otherwise." "Want to take a look?" She paused. That smug calm cracked for just a second. "We'll be escalating this," she said finally, turning back toward her car. "You'll be hearing from us again." "Looking forward to it," I said. I wasn't. That night, I double-checked the documents. Pulled every record I had. Parcel boundaries, land use exemptions, zoning maps. Everything confirmed what I already knew. Hickory Ridge had no legal power over me. My land was a private agricultural parcel annexed generations ago with no association ties. They were bluffing, pushing, hoping I'd fold. But folding's not in my blood. Over the next week, I started noticing things. A gray sedan parked across the road for hours. 2 rows of headlights showing up just before dawn and then disappearing. A drone, small, quiet, hovering above the barn one afternoon. I shot it down. Legally, mind you. It was under 400 feet. Texas has rules about that. I left the pieces in a plastic bag hanging from my gate, labeled, "Property is not a playground." Then came the whispering. A neighbor who used to wave stopped making eye contact. Someone posted on Nextdoor about unlicensed livestock operations and questionable activities on the old Anderson farm. That's what they called it, the Anderson farm. Like I wasn't real. Like I hadn't poured 5 years of sweat and soul into this land. Still, I held my ground. Until one morning, I woke up to the sound of tires crunching gravel, bright lights, sirens, and a loudspeaker barking orders at me to come outside. Hands up. It was 5:39 in the morning, and my war with the HOA had just gone from annoying to dangerous. There's nothing quite like the sound of a bullhorn screaming at you before sunrise to remind you that you don't actually own peace. You rent it, and someone can always try to repossess it. It was pitch black outside when I stepped onto the porch in my flannel pants and boots, holding my hands in the air like a goddamn fugitive in a movie. The air was cold enough to bite, and the only light came from the patrol cruiser parked by my gate, high beams slicing through the morning fog. "Step forward. Keep your hands visible." I did exactly that, blinking into the blinding light, trying not to say something sarcastic that might get me shot. I counted 2 deputies. One behind the driver's door, hand on his sidearm, and another already halfway down my gravel path, flashlight up, eyes scanning me like I was packing C4 under my bathrobe. "What the hell's going on?" I asked, loud enough for both of them to hear. "Sir, we received a 911 call reporting an armed trespasser on this property." "Well, the trespasser owns the deed," I said flatly. "You'll find his name's Ellis Brooks." That got a pause. The closer deputy, tall, mid-30s, not thrilled to be up this early, tilted his head and lowered his flashlight slightly. "This is your residence?" he asked. "Been mine for 5 years. Want me to show you my utility bill or the scars on my hands from building the damn chicken coop?" He glanced back at his partner, who seemed less convinced. "Do you have ID?" he asked. "In the house," I replied. "On the kitchen table, right next to a cup of coffee I didn't get to finish, thanks to this circus." I kept my hands visible and slow-walked them through the process. License, property tax statement, parcel deed with the map. Same folder I kept handy since Karen Slater decided my farm was her jurisdictional sandbox. The officers stepped aside and reviewed everything under the cruiser's dome light. The taller one, Deputy Ames, I later learned, started to relax. The other, Deputy Ridge, still looked like he wanted an excuse to unclip his holster. I stood with my arms crossed, the chill getting into my bones, watching my breath fog up in front of me. "So who the hell called this in?" I asked finally. Ames cleared his throat. "A resident from the Hickory Ridge HOA claimed she saw someone trespassing near the property line, possibly armed, acting suspiciously. Said the suspect fled toward the barn. Described a white male, flannel shirt, gray beard." I blinked. "That would be me. That's how I look every day, because I live here." Ridge piped up. "She insisted the property was part of the HOA boundary." "She insists a lot of things," I muttered. "Did she mention this trespasser had a coffee mug in one hand and a bucket of goat feed in the other?" Ames looked tired. "Sir, do you know a Karen Slater?" I snorted. "Unfortunately, yes. She's the local HOA warlord." There was a beat of silence. Ames exhaled through his nose, long and slow. "Mr. Brooks, I believe this was a misunderstanding, but we'll have to write up the call regardless. You'll get a copy of the incident report." "Damn right I will," I said, "because this isn't just a misunderstanding. This is harassment." He nodded slowly. "We'll make note of your concerns." Before they left, I asked them to wait while I ran back inside. I returned with my phone and took pictures, dash cam numbers, plates, faces. They didn't like it, but they didn't stop me. I wanted a record, not because I feared the cops. Hell, Ames seemed reasonable, but because I was learning fast. People like Karen weaponize the system. And if you're not careful, you become a target with no proof. By the time they pulled away, the sky had shifted from black to steel gray. My goats were awake and bleating like I owed them an apology. The coffee was cold. I stood on the porch, the adrenaline still humming in my teeth, and dialed Sarah Morales, my lawyer. She picked up after the 3rd ring, voice groggy. "It's barely 6, Ellis. You alive?" "Barely," I said. "The HOA just sent cops to my door with a false 911 call. Claimed I was an armed trespasser on my own land." There was a pause. And then, "That's not just overreach. That's criminal. I'll come by at 9. I hung up and looked out at the field, half expecting another drone to rise out of the tree line like some mechanical vulture. The chickens had scattered from the commotion. The barn door was swinging in the wind. And somewhere, in her tightly trimmed yard full of plastic tulips, Karen Slater was sipping coffee and smiling. If she thought this would scare me off, she hadn't done her homework. 3 days after the cops showed up at dawn, I got a second letter from Hickory Ridge HOA. Same logo, same smug formatting, different flavor of bullshit. This one was thicker, 3 pages typed in aggressive legalese. The cover sheet said, "Formal notice of violation, unauthorized commercial activity." The HOA was now accusing me of running an unlicensed agricultural business within a residential zone, which, again, would be hilarious if it weren't dipped in. Malice and filed with the county clerk. They'd attached photographs, taken without permission, of me selling eggs and honey at my roadside stand, along with a copy of my old Facebook post advertising surplus zucchinis and wildflower honey. That post was from last summer. I'd made about $60 in total and gave half of it to the volunteer fire department in town. Now, according to Karen Slater and her merry band of neurotic authoritarians, I was a threat to the legal and economic integrity of the community. I called Sarah Morales again. She answered before the first ring ended. "I figured you'd be calling," she said. "The clerk sent me a copy of the complaint this morning." "Is it real?" "Oh, it's real. It's also flimsy as hell." She explained that Karen had filed a formal nuisance claim through the HOA, alleging that I was operating a commercial enterprise in violation of community standards. The twist? She'd pushed it through a zoning board contact claiming my property was under consideration for annexation into HOA jurisdiction. A complete fabrication, but one that put me in the bureaucratic crosshairs. Sarah told me to hold tight while she drafted a cease and desist letter. I did more than that. I spent the next day putting up 3 new signs by my fence. Big, bold letters. Private property not subject to HOA. Below that, farm stand license pending. Trespassers will be photographed, fed to chickens, or both. That afternoon, I caught a gray Toyota idling across the road, windows up, engine running. I walked out with a jug of water and waved. The car peeled off. I figured someone was gathering evidence. Karen struck again 2 mornings later. I was replacing a busted fence board when I heard tires on gravel. I turned around to see a woman in a navy blue blazer marching up my drive with a man trailing behind her, holding a tablet and looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Brooks," she called out, "we're here to conduct an inspection on behalf of the Hickory Ridge Community Standards Committee." I rested my hand on the hammer in my tool belt. "You're not welcome here. This is private land." She smiled like a Stepford wife at a gun show. "The HOA has received multiple complaints of unregulated agricultural activity. You're obligated to get off my property before I call the sheriff," I said. The man with the tablet looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Karen's smile flattened, and she turned sharply, heels crunching in the gravel. "You can make this difficult if you'd like," she said, without looking back. "But that won't stop the wheels from turning. You're not above the law, Mr. Brooks." I called Sarah again. She laughed, not kindly, not softly. "Let's give them a little taste of legal hell," she said. By the end of the day, we had a notarized letter sent to both the HOA and the zoning board, clearly outlining that my land was not within their governance, and that any future harassment would be met with legal action. Sarah also filed a preemptive notice with the county, requesting formal acknowledgement of my independent zoning status. I thought that would slow them down. I was wrong. The very next evening, someone shared a post on the local Facebook group titled, "Who is Ellis Brooks Really?" It was a thread of photos, my goats, my roadside stand, the drone I shot down, paired with inflammatory captions, illegally selling, food without inspection, noise complaints from animal pens, unregulated livestock near children. The comments were a circus of paranoia and suburban drama. One woman wrote, "We moved here for peace and security, not for barnyard smells and redneck politics." Another chimed in, "Why does he need so many cameras? If he's not hiding anything, he shouldn't be afraid of HOA oversight." That's when I realized this wasn't just a campaign of paperwork. Karen had gone public. She was stirring up fear, rewriting the narrative, framing me as some lawless prepper hell-bent on destroying property values and neighborhood tranquility. I decided it was time to go full Texan. The next morning, I installed 2 new motion sensor floodlights by the roadside and repositioned my trail cameras to catch plates, faces, and drones. I started keeping a logbook of every interaction, date, time, what was said or done. I built a website, thislandismyland.net, where I uploaded documents, maps, photos, and a digital boundary overlay proving my independence from Hickory Ridge. And, just for fun, I added a section called Karen's Greatest Hits, which included a clip of her marching up my path, clipboard in hand, and audio from our first encounter, courtesy of my doorbell camera. By the end of the week, site traffic had jumped into the thousands, but I knew that wouldn't stop her. If anything, it'd piss her off, which meant the next move wouldn't come in the form of a letter. It would come in the dark. I woke up to the sound of buzzing, not the bees. I know that sound. This was different. Mechanical, high-pitched, irritating, like a lawnmower choking on a mosquito. I rolled out of bed and went to the window just in time to see a drone zipping off across the tree line, swerving awkwardly like the pilot had been surprised. It was the 3rd one this week. I walked outside, still barefoot, and checked the property line. No footprints, no signs of anyone near the barn, but someone had dragged a trash bag across the ditch and tossed it halfway into my field. It wasn't there yesterday. And it wasn't regular garbage. I poked it with the end of a rake. The smell hit first. Sour, wet, and undeniably animal. I pulled the bag open just enough to see feathers. And a twisted leg. A chicken. Dead. Stuffed in a bag. Dumped just far enough onto my land that it looked like it came from me. Cute. I checked the cameras. Sure enough, at exactly 2:43 in the morning, a hooded figure stepped out of a white SUV parked across the road, jogged to the ditch, tossed the bag, and sprinted back. The vehicle? Same make and model as Karen Slater's, right down to the custom license plate frame that said, "Be kind, rewind," or "I'll sue." I should have been disgusted. Instead, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. This was her next move. Roadkill Theater. Sarah came by around 11 with a flash drive and some legal forms. I showed her the footage. She shook her head slowly and muttered, "She's escalating. This is evidence tampering, illegal dumping, and intimidation wrapped in one." What do? We make it public. We clip the footage down to a 30-second loop, grainy but clear enough to make out her walk, her body language, the exact moment she slipped and almost fell back into the ditch. I uploaded it to my site under a new category, Karen After Dark, titled the clip, "Caught Red-Handed, HOA President Plants Evidence at 2:43 a.m. I posted the link in the same local Facebook group where she'd been spreading lies. Then I emailed it to 3 local journalists, a HOA watchdog blog, and, for fun, the HOA's own board email address. By sundown, the video had over 7,000 views. Someone added a slow-motion remix. Another person photoshopped her holding a raw chicken like a grenade. The comment section turned into a meme war, and for once I wasn't the villain in the room. But Karen wasn't done. The next night, someone cut the line to my exterior security floodlight, clean slice, precision job, and just to really hammer it home, they smeared something on my barn door. Looked like oil. Or shit. Or a mix. Above it, scrawled in white spray paint, "Traitor." I checked the cameras again. This time, the vandal wore a ski mask and gloves. Couldn't get a face, couldn't get a plate, but their height, build, and the gait. Same as the teenager I'd seen before, helping Karen set up a HOA fair booth 2 weeks back. Some local kid she always dragged around like a junior deputy. I didn't bother confronting him. I filed a report with the sheriff and sent them the footage. They were polite but non-committal. No suspect, no arrest, not enough to go on. So I did what I do best. I upgraded, replaced the floodlight with motion-activated dual beams connected to solar backup, added 2 more trail cams along the perimeter, one hidden in a birdhouse, another camouflaged under a rusted mailbox, switched to off-grid backups for the cameras in case someone got fancy again with the wiring. Sarah started drafting an official injunction request to prevent Karen and anyone acting under her from setting foot near my property. She said we had enough now, the video, the vandalism, the social posts, the dumping, to at least push the judge to grant a temporary restraining order. Then came the article. A local online tabloid picked up the chicken story and ran it under the headline, "Cluck off, HOA president accused of foul play in farm feud." Not Pulitzer-worthy journalism, but it spread fast. Karen went dark online. Her profile disappeared. The HOA Facebook page turned off comments, but the silence didn't comfort me. It was the silence of a coiled snake. 2 days later, I found a man in a polo shirt snapping photos of my goat pen from across the road. He looked nervous. Said he was just documenting for the community. When I asked which community, he said, Hickory Ridge. I asked him to leave. He did. Fast. They weren't sending police anymore. They were sending scouts. Karen couldn't win through rules. So, she changed the game. And I wasn't about to play defense forever. It happened just after midnight. I was halfway through editing a blog post titled Why HOA Power Isn't Governance, It's Theater when the alarm on my phone went off. Motion trigger, northwest camera, near the equipment shed. At first, I thought it might be a deer or one of the goats that slipped past the fence again. Happens more than I like to admit. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside barefoot, figuring I'd be back in under 5 minutes. Then I saw the glow. Not moonlight, not floodlight, fire. I broke into a sprint before my brain even caught up. The air smelled like burning plastic and hay. The small wooden awning that shaded my backup irrigation pump, gone, already swallowed. Flames licked at the shed siding, which was old cedar dry as dust. It crackled like a bonfire in hell. I grabbed the closest hose and cranked the valve. Nothing. Pressure was gone. They'd cut the water. For half a second, I froze. Not in fear, but in calculation. No water, wind out of the east, structures nearby. I ran back, grabbed the fire extinguisher from the kitchen and a spare from the garage. I managed to beat the flames down enough to stop them from reaching the barn. But the awning, the pump controls, and half of the tool storage were blackened, ruined. The fire department arrived 20 minutes too late to do anything but hose down ash. 2 trucks, 3 men in yellow. They looked at me like I was trouble. One of them, older with a salt and pepper beard, asked me how the fire started. You tell me, I said. I've got cameras. Want to take a look? The footage wasn't great. A tall figure in dark clothes, hooded, baseball bat slung across the back. They crept through the tree line, stayed out of direct angles, but one of the new side cams caught them mid-throw. Glass bottle, rag hanging from the top, classic Molotov. The fireball burst on impact. The sheriff arrived half an hour later. Deputy Ames again. He looked more pissed than I was. You have a suspect? He asked. Not a name, I said. But I've seen that walk before. That swing in the knees. That lanky teenage speed wobble. It's that kid Karen uses at every HOA event. Zach. Drives a red Civic with a vape sticker in the back window. Ames nodded. We've had complaints about him before. Petty vandalism. Trespassing. Could be him. They took a copy of the footage and promised to follow up. I didn't wait. Next morning, I called Sarah. She was already at her desk. They cut the water line and tried to burn down the shed, I said flatly. This isn't a dispute anymore. This is a goddamn arson attempt. Sarah didn't interrupt. When I was done, she simply said, I want you to come to my office. When I got there, she already had a folder waiting. She slid it across the desk. Inside was a restraining order application, not just against Karen, against the entire HOA board. She'd also drafted an evidence packet full of time-stamped screenshots, social media threats, and the video from the night before. We'll submit it today, she said. But I want to go further. Further how? We're not just filing a restraining order, we're pressing criminal charges. And then we're going to file a civil suit for negligence, harassment, and property damage. I like the sound of that. She wasn't done. And I want to add something else. We hit the HOA where they live, their insurance. If we can prove the board fostered a hostile environment that encouraged this kind of escalation, their liability umbrella gets torched. Karen, of course, denied everything. She posted a short, passive-aggressive note on the HOA's community board the next day. Dear neighbors, I am saddened by recent events, and while I had no involvement, I urge our community to remain civil and respectful. Violence is never the answer. However, we must continue to uphold the standards of Hickory Ridge and resist unlawful behavior from those who do not abide by our vision. The comments under her post got locked within the hour. But I wasn't interested in Facebook wars anymore. I started preparing for the next level. I installed a backup generator, bought a secondhand water tanker, hired a friend who did professional security installs to wire the whole property with solar backups and real-time cloud sync. I even mounted 2 floodlights that could be activated manually from my phone, because next time I wasn't going to play the victim. Later that week, Ames called me. We picked up the kid, he said. Zach. Got him on a traffic stop. Red Civic, broken taillight, Molotov residue in the trunk. Idiot didn't even clean it. Did he confess? Not exactly, but he had Discord messages on his phone, talking about teaching the farmer a lesson. Says he got the idea from a HOA meeting where they joked about flushing the rats out. Names Karen specifically. They booked Zach on multiple charges: arson, trespassing, destruction of property. But the DA was already downplaying it. Youthful mistake. No prior record. Community ties. Karen's name never made it into the official police statement, but I had the screenshots. And I had something else now. Momentum. She crossed a line, and I was done waiting for justice to show up politely. They say you can't fight City Hall, but they've clearly never had their property firebombed while the county sipped coffee and watched. After the arson, after the half-assed police report, after Karen's crocodile Facebook post, I sat in Sarah's office with a cold cup of vending machine coffee and a war forming in my chest. I want to go higher, I told her. Karen's the head, but the real disease is in the system. The county, zoning board, code enforcement. All of them looked away. Some helped her. I want them in court. Sarah looked at me across her cluttered desk. Legal pads, folders, a dying cactus named Jerome. And she didn't blink. Then we hit them with an administrative negligence suit. She laid out the plan in a way only a good lawyer can. Clinical, brutal, and elegant. We wouldn't sue the HOA directly, not yet. Instead, we'd go after the county government itself for failure to protect private property, for ignoring criminal escalation, and for enabling a private corporate body, the HOA, to act as an unlawful governing force beyond its jurisdiction. Most people don't go this route because they're scared of retaliation, she said. You're lucky. You've already been burned. There's nothing left to threaten. We filed the suit the next day. The complaint was 67 pages long. Every incident logged, every letter, video, report, and social media post cataloged. It included screenshots of HOA zoning maps doctored to suggest my land fell within their boundaries, which the county had accepted without question. It included the footage of the drone, the chicken dump, the Facebook slander, and Zach's Discord messages naming Karen and referencing clearance from the board. Sarah also added one more twist, a request for a full independent audit of Hickory, Ridge HOA's financials, communications, and interactions with county officials. Not because it was directly tied to the arson, but because she suspected backroom deals, favors, and hush-hush emails. And if we were going to war, we might as well open every damn door in the building. Within a week, the county responded, not with a rebuttal, but with panic. I got a call from someone I'd never met before, assistant county administrator. He wanted to meet informally to discuss resolution pathways. I declined. 2 days later, a public information officer issued a vague press release. The County of Fairview takes all allegations of misconduct seriously. We are conducting an internal review regarding recent citizen concerns. At this time, we are cooperating fully with all legal processes. Translation: we're screwed, and we know it. What followed was chaos. Journalists began calling, small-town ones at first, then regional outlets. One local station ran a full 5-minute piece titled "Farm Under Fire: How One Man is Fighting Back Against HOA Overreach." They interviewed me standing in front of my blackened shed, hat in hand, chickens clucking in the background like backup. Singers. Karen tried to respond. She went on a rival blog and claimed I was a provocateur trying to dismantle community harmony. She even suggested, with no evidence, that the arson might have been self-inflicted for media sympathy. That backfired hard. Screenshots of her quote went viral. Commenters began digging. Turns out, Karen had a cousin on the zoning review board and a brother-in-law who handled municipal contracts for HOA landscaping. Sarah sent subpoenas. And then it got quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The legal kind. The kind that stinks of conference rooms filled with lawyers and people in cheap suits flipping through folders labeled damage control. Meanwhile, I kept working the land. I didn't stop the farm stand. In fact, I expanded it, registered a formal farm vendor exemption with the State Agricultural Board, and posted the certificate right next to the chicken wire. People from town started showing up, not just to buy eggs and honey, but to talk. To tell me they'd been watching, that they were tired of the HOA bullshit too, that what happened to me could have happened to them. One guy, Doug, retired Navy, lived 2 blocks from the HOA's edge, shook my hand and said, "You're not just fighting for your land, man. You're fighting for hours." I didn't know what to say to that. The court set a hearing date. The county tried to delay it, denied everything, claimed procedural ignorance. But Sarah was ready. She walked into that hearing like a general on the day of battle, binder under one arm, hair tied up like she meant business, not dinner. We sat in the small county courtroom with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A judge who looked like he wanted to be fishing somewhere in Montana stared at us over half-moon glasses. Sarah stood up and delivered 22 minutes of fire. She quoted state laws, cited constitutional protections for private property, outlined a pattern of systemic neglect and abuse of authority, and pointed to every instance the county had allowed the HOA to operate like a shadow government, unchecked, unregulated, and dangerously emboldened. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. By the end of her opening, the county's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a stapler. The judge didn't rule that day, said he needed to review the material, but I could feel it. We'd cracked the shell. For the first time, they weren't looking at me like a nuisance. They were looking at the system that let this happen. And suddenly, Karen Slater wasn't just a crazy neighbor. She was evidence. I thought the courtroom would be the climax, that once we made our case, the machine would sputter, cough, and collapse. But what followed wasn't collapse. It was detonation. 3 days after the hearing, the local paper published a story titled, "Farmland Firestorm, County Under Fire for Ignoring HOA Abuse." It ran on the front page, just below a piece about the high school football team's losing streak. Small towns have a way of balancing the absurd and the essential. Then it hit the state media. One regional news outlet picked it up with a more dramatic spin. HOA harassment, county complicity, and a farmer who fought back. By the time I saw the article, it had been shared over 20,000 times. People across the country, farmers, homesteaders, retired vets, hell, even HOA refugees, started emailing me, offering support, legal tips, free lumber. A woman in Arizona offered me a milk goat named Judy. I almost said yes. Karen disappeared from public life. Her house, the oversized Tudor clone on Maplewood Court, went dark. No porch lights, no garden flags, no HOA newsletters in the mailboxes. According to a neighbor I trusted, she'd taken medical leave from her duties and was not accepting visitors. Her name, however, kept showing up in subpoenas. Then the auditors came. Sarah's request for a forensic audit had been granted by the court, and the independent review team hit Hickory Ridge like IRS agents on Black Friday. They started pulling everything: budgets, email logs, board meeting minutes, contractor bids, landscaping expenses, and, most deliciously, zoning correspondence with county officials. The HOA board panicked. 2 members resigned within a week. One wrote a dramatic resignation letter accusing Karen of manipulative behavior and weaponizing community trust. The HOA Facebook page went private. The community email chain got mysteriously deleted. Meanwhile, Hickory Ridge homeowners, the ones who once looked at me like I was a feral dog with a shovel, started coming by. One guy, Dennis, mid-50s, wore golf shirts like body armor, showed up with a pie. A store-bought pie, which I appreciated more than if he'd tried baking. "I didn't know," he said, awkwardly holding the tin. "I just thought you were some stubborn survivalist. But this is bigger." It was. The county commissioner's office launched an internal investigation. One staffer got fired, zoning clerk tied to fake HOA annexation maps. More were reassigned. The sheriff's office sent Ames to apologize formally, badge and all, for not treating the early incidents seriously. The thing is, I didn't want apologies. I wanted change, and change started coming faster than I could track it. A local councilwoman proposed an ordinance banning any HOA from issuing fines or enforcing compliance beyond clearly defined deed-restricted properties. The State Agriculture Board issued a press release defending microfarms and condemning municipal interference with food sovereignty. Suddenly, I was giving interviews, NPR, a podcast with some guy named Ranch Dad, even a live stream with a libertarian YouTuber who kept calling me the Goat Whisperer. I tried to stay grounded, but it was hard, especially when one of the auditors, a nervous guy named Blake, quietly slipped Sarah a USB with what he called unofficial minutes from a private HOA leadership retreat. Among the files, a PowerPoint titled "Resisting Zoning Rollbacks: Strategies for Maintaining Authority." Slide 3, neutralize opposition, target outliers early. I was slide 3. When Sarah showed me the file, I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. Then I got quiet, because it wasn't funny. It was organized, calculated. I wasn't unlucky. I was selected, because I was outside their jurisdiction, loud and inconvenient. And still, I stayed. I kept tending the goats, fixing fences, selling eggs and honey and zucchini the size of toddlers. Not out of spite, but because this land was mine. No PowerPoint or HOA bylaw was ever going to change that. Then came the final blow. Karen was served with an individual civil lawsuit, not just for HOA actions, but personal liability tied to false reports, malicious conduct, and enabling criminal activity. Her name was now public record in a case that included video evidence, screenshots, and a hand-drawn map labeled HOA expansion goals, with my land circled in red ink. She tried to settle. Sarah said no, because it wasn't about money anymore. It was about setting a precedent. The courtroom was too clean, too quiet. There's something surreal about walking into a place that smells like lemon disinfectant and knowing your entire life's fight will come down to people in suits who never touch soil with their bare hands. But I'd walked through fire, smoke, and bureaucratic sabotage. I wasn't there to impress them. I was there to finish this. Karen sat 3 rows ahead, next to a new attorney, younger, sleeker. Her hair was pulled back into a knot so tight it looked like it hurt. She didn't look at me. Not once. The lawsuit against her, separate from the larger action against the HOA, was the main event today. Civil court. But the stakes were real. Personal damages, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and complicity in the arson attempt through gross negligence. Sarah handled it like a master class in calm dissection. She didn't raise her voice, didn't dramatize. Just walked the court through the timeline, the false HOA claims, the drone footage, the chicken incident, the vandalism, the fake inspection attempt, and finally, the arson, with screenshots of Zach's chat logs naming Karen as the one who gave the green light. The defense stuttered, claimed Karen had no knowledge, that Zach acted alone, that any connection was speculative. Then Sarah dropped the bomb, a handwritten note from a seized HOA document reading, "Keep pressure on the perimeter properties." Fire may be metaphorical, but sometimes it spreads. Karen's handwriting, verified by a forensic analyst. The judge didn't need long. She ruled in our favor on all counts. Karen was held personally liable, ordered to pay damages, court costs, and formally barred from serving on any HOA board in the state for the next 10 years. The number wasn't huge, low 6 figures, but the point wasn't the money, it was the disgrace. The stain. After the ruling, Karen stood slowly and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. I noticed her attorney didn't follow her, just sighed, packed up, and muttered something about burning bridges. Outside, Sarah and I stood in the sunlight. I didn't say anything for a while, just listened to the wind move through the courthouse flagpoles. "You did it," she said. "No," I said. "We did." That evening, I walked my land. The goats followed, as usual, like awkward little shadows. The air smelled like October, soil, dry grass, the tail end of the harvest. The scorched section near the old shed had been cleared, repurposed into a small greenhouse I'd been building. Just tomatoes and peppers for now, but enough to grow from. The HOA was still limping. With the court's ruling, several residents filed to dissolve the board entirely. A vote was pending. A reform slate had already formed, promising transparency, community input, and no more suburban strongmen. People waved at me now. Some still a little awkward, but it meant something. One afternoon, Dennis, pie guy, stopped by with his son to buy eggs. The kid asked if he could feed the goats. I let him. One goat chewed on his sleeve, and he laughed so hard he snorted. It was good. The land had never been quieter. Not empty. Not still. Just free. I still kept the cameras up, not because I was scared, but because memory matters. Because history can't be rewritten if it's recorded well. I still had Sarah's number pinned to the fridge. Still kept a copy of the restraining order in a fireproof safe. But mostly I just worked. Ate better, slept deeper, smiled more. One morning, as the sun cracked over the edge of the fields, I sat with coffee in hand and looked across my acres, green, stubborn, alive, and finally said the words out loud, "They'll never take this from me again." And that was the end of it. Not peace maybe, but something stronger.